Welcome to Transformational Blueprints, the podcast that's here to tackle the big question. Why do so many transformation programs fall short, and what can we do about it? I'm Mario Michaels, founder and director of Synaxia Group, and I'm thrilled to have you join me. In this series, we go beyond theory, bringing you first-hand stories and insights from some of the world's top architecture and transformation leaders. It's all about sharing real-world lessons, sparking fresh ideas, and giving back to the architecture community. So whether you're looking to learn, be inspired, or stay ahead of the curve, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's dive in together. Welcome everybody. Today we'll be talking to Pablo Bawdekar about building high performance architecture teams. Pablo's a chief architect / CTO with 25 years experience in our industry. He's worked extensively in Australia, the US, and is now in the UK and has been for the past 5 years. He started his career in technology consulting and worked across many sectors: NSW, government, investment banking, media, energy, etc., etc. He's also worked in many roles, including CIO, CTO, program delivery, running applications and data teams. So a good variety there. I've invited him onto the show to hear more about his architecture perspectives from the last 15 years working specifically within the insurance sector across large global organizations like QBE, specialty organizations like Aspen, and some other household names. He was also the tech consulting leader for specialty insurance sector. So Pablo, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Mario, thanks very much for having me on your show. This was pretty cool. Is it actually a show or is it a podcast?
Bit of both. Yeah, bit of both. Yeah, we've got a YouTube channel. A lot. We're gonna go viral, mate. We're gonna go viral.
That's
so
amazing.
Yeah, YouTube channel, and then across all the major platforms from an audio as well. So where we like to start each episode, Pablo, is just so there's a bit of context, just tell us a bit about your background, maybe stuff that I've not mentioned in the introduction, how you got to where you are, and so on.
Yeah, okay, cool. Oh, I think you kind of nailed it in the way that you summarized it in the last few minutes. But
Yeah.
I guess I've been quite fortunate in that I started my career in tech consulting, which meant that someone showed me where the bar was early in your career. And I think that's really important because, unless someone shows you that, you'll never know what other people's expectations of you are. The other good thing was I worked in lots of different industries, lots of different sectors, and did lots of different roles. Program management is very different from application delivery, and just getting those different perspectives have been quite useful for me. But I think I was getting really into New South Wales government in Australia and loving that because of the purpose of the role, how you're building, providing services to the community. And I kind of had to be talked into going into insurance a little bit. Because I was so into the government world. I didn't want to go corporate. But I think the best way of explaining it to me, and what really attracts me about insurance, is actually the purpose is really aligned. Okay. So it's about helping people in their moment of need in the best possible way. And the world just could not operate without insurance.
Okay. Yeah. So again, just for a bit of background, a bit of context, what was your scope at Aspen? Just so when we are talking about it, we've got an idea.
Yeah, so my scope at Aspen was head of architecture. So I had the full stack. I had business architecture through to application enterprise down to infrastructure and security. So that was quite good. It gave us a lot of agility to be able to initiate projects and scope them rapidly, and then when we see them through, just having that tight team there was just great. And it really was a high performing team. I don't know, I'm saying why. He is a high performing team. They're kicking goals, doing a great job for Aspen, really adding value. And the second role I picked up with them was running their application delivery team. And having the application delivery team and the architecture team together allowed us to really get some stuff done in a very rapid way.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So having worked in different sectors, different businesses, different size businesses, you would have come across a lot of architects. What do you think makes a great architect in today's world?
I think there's a really important question. I I think an architect needs to have a really good foundation in technology. And you don't always see that, because sometimes the business will come to them and say, hey, can you put this in? And they'll go, yep. Why do you want to put this in? Because of this. And unless they really do their due diligence, go and talk to the supplier, go and figure out how it works, how it integrates, and all the rest of it, I don't think you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
So having that understanding of technology is really important. But partnered with that, and it doesn't matter which layer of the organization you're in, whether you're in infrastructure or you're, a business architect or, an enterprise architect, whatever it might be, you have got to be clear in how you explain that technology so other people can understand it.
Yeah.
And I think the two of those go hand in hand. And if you're able to explain your decisions to people across various layers of the organization, then that means you really thought it through. And it's a resilient solution. But those two attributes, I think, are important. But what makes a great architect on top of that is their ability to sell concepts, to stay curious, to think about it from the customer's perspective, think about value is really key. So if you're going to put something in, is it going to make a difference? Is there a net outcome? Think commercially.
Yeah.
So is it affordable for an organization? And think about risk as well. I think that's key. So someone who balances those perspectives, I think, then builds a great architecture team. Someone who's really plugged into the business and has earned the moniker of being the trusted advisor.
That's one of the biggest challenges now every architect faces, is that balancing of innovation, specifically, with AI and automation and whatnot, balancing that with the risk side. It's quite topical. So we're going to move on to sort of insurance as a sector. Obviously, you've worked in it for many years. And speaking to my clients and my candidates, the first thing they all say is insurance is different. What makes insurance so different from an architecture perspective? And just what makes insurance so different, I suppose, from an industry?
Yeah, so it's unbelievably intangible, right?
Yeah.
So let's just have a think about what insurance is. So basically, insurance is an agreement between you or your corporation with an insurer in case something goes wrong. And if something goes wrong, your expectation is that they'll make you whole in some way, but what that agreement would be, but it's a financial payment that you're expecting.
Yeah.
So that risk could be easy to understand, like the loss of a home. In the case of a fire, happy days. So, depending on the contract that you've arranged with your insurer, they'll replace your home by giving you a bunch of money, which you then can rebuild your home and your contents if you're taking that out as well. But insurance is kind of changing, right? It changes at the time. So now cyber is a really big thing. So Mario, if your organization got hacked and all your data was stolen, if you had not taken out cyber cover, well, that outage that could possibly take your company down is on you now. So, it's a really important point, because insurance means you have to foresee these risks and then want to get cover. And in some cases, obviously, you have to take cover. So, if you buy a house and you get a mortgage, well, your bank will expect you to take insurance out, right? But there's loads of others that you need. So that advice that you get for those intangible things are really important. So what makes insurance different is how you operate that business model, because property and casualty is pretty easy stuff, like your fires, your homes, and all that sort of stuff. But then you've got life insurance, you've got health insurance, and you've got specialty insurance for that scary stuff that happens every once in a while for very big organizations. And when you think about the scale of some of these potential losses, the obvious one that comes to mind is a crisis they had in the Gulf, right? When the Exxon Valdez, that was enormous loss. And if only one insurer was covering that loss, they would have
Hmm.
taken that insurer out. So that
Yeah.
that insurance is split across lots of other organizations, and that means that if that loss happens, doesn't because if that loss had just been one insurer, it would probably taken the market out as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a few things that make it unique. One is just the scale of the potential losses, the
Hmm.
fact that it's a once a year
Yeah.
transaction that you're going to make,
Yeah.
but then also that promise to, to make you whole in a financial way.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can mean that, insurance organizations can be supply chain organizations.
Yeah.
So, for example, for cars, if
Hmm.
you total your car or you damage your car, just getting that into the right place means a supply chain
Yeah.
to recover the cost of the car or repair the car,
Hmm.
whatever it might be. Also, how you manage the incredible amount of capital that you need,
Hmm. Yeah.
because there's all that sort of stuff. So,
Okay.
so what seems like quite a simple thing means that your organization supply those insurers, your reinsurers, quite
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah, and I suppose every industry has its nuances, right? But do you believe for or within insurance, it's necessary for IT architects, and we call IT, that's across enterprise, that's everything. Do you think they need to have subject matter expertise, for example, pricing within insurance, or do you not feel that's, is that an easily to pick up skill?
It depends where they are in the
Hmm.
organization. So the cloud architects that I employed to have the best cloud skills. I did
Yeah.
not care whether they were insurance people or
Yeah.
not. It was important for me that they went on a course to learn about insurance so that they knew why they were doing things and
Yeah.
what the risk would mean for an
Yeah. Yeah.
organization. But I wanted the best technologists for
Yeah.
those roles. The same for infrastructure. But at the other span in a business architect role, I think it's critical for them to know the area,
Yeah. The business.
because they're just, each one of those facets of insurance can be incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
So you mentioned pricing. If you're doing pricing for commercial lines versus, which is, liability, indemnity, that sort of stuff, and your pricing for property is quite
Hmm.
different.
Yeah. Very different. Yeah.
Yeah, but how you think about it, how it fits in a process flow and all the rest of
Yeah.
it, I don't think that people would have the patience,
Yeah.
because sometimes those architects are also seen as not just documenting stuff, but also adding value.
Yeah.
So they'd be saying, hey, I did this at this place this way, I did it this place
Yeah.
this way, and, bringing that new thinking in would be important.
And that's a really interesting piece actually, because sometimes deep industry knowledge can actually hinder technology architecture and hinder that innovation, because somebody could come in and just say, oh, this is what we did at this business, which is in the same area, so we'll just do it here. And it's the same challenges, so we'll just do that and it worked and so on. Whereas actually maybe if you do get somebody from a different industry, it's like, I don't know, maybe from retail to insurance, for example. Well, this is how we did it. It's consumer led. So actually, in our consumer led business, why don't we do this instead? And that's innovation, because you're getting new ideas from new industries, and it helps sort of evolve the industry as a whole as well.
Yeah, 100%, Mario. I think I think it's important, going back to my point of
Yeah.
how I had a background in multiple sectors.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, you'd think that procurement in government would be the most staid thing in the world. Well,
Yeah.
actually, you know what? They've got great processes
Hmm.
for how to make the best possible decisions. And that rigor doesn't need to be constraining, it can be enabling, right?
Yeah.
So bringing some of those viewpoints from other industries into insurance is great. Now,
Yeah.
I'll give you a better, more technical one, would be digital.
Yeah.
I think some of the best digital people in the industry are not insurance people, and getting those people in for personal lines, which I've done before, meant you kind of bring it. You can kind of bring a new culture into insurance as well.
Yeah. So,
So
Pablo, do you think the real challenge is a lack of tech adoption, or is the industry just too risk averse?
I guess that's a tricky question. So I guess the way that I think about it is how important is technology to the purpose of that company. So if you think about an organization like Google or a fintech that's a startup, well, technology is the company, right? And the
Yep.
board is technology people, and you're making decisions about your product and all that sort of
Yep.
stuff. In that sort of situation, you absolutely would expect to see tech adoption, tech innovation, people trying stuff out and seeing if it
Yep.
works, and your percentage of spend is going to be enormous.
Yep.
Conversely, I'd say construction and I've worked in the construction industry. I said for them, it's really the building that's the most important thing, putting it up and all the rest of it. So in that sort of situation, you see people in tech probably buried. I shouldn't say buried, but it's in the organization, maybe under a COO.
Yep.
Much smaller tech, because realistically, their requirements of tech are much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that technology is not critical, like email, data, their
Yes.
apps,
Yeah.
their general ledgers. That's all important. So, okay, so given that, the reason why I say it's a tricky question is because when you think about an insurance organization, the two key things are either the claim.
Yep.
You want that claim to be processed, and as we spoke about, that issue that they had in the Gulf of Mexico with the BP spill, it was enormous, really complicated.
Yeah.
Those sort of things, getting that right, getting that paid out, figuring that stuff out. Tech does play an important role. Sorry, is part of the core of the company, as is the underwriting process.
Yep.
So making sure that you are taking on a risk in an area that you want to, and the customer's paying the right price, and you've got enough capital to be able to pay out for the claims. So this is where I say it gets tricky, right? Because personal line carriers, some of them, technology is the company.
Yep.
So I'll give you an example. So I worked for a travel insurer, and we built our own policy administration system. And I was part of the exec committee for that organization, and tech was a very big important part of their purpose, right? Because straight through processing, making sure the claim was paid out quickly and easily for the customer, making it a delightful experience, getting a digital experience that's multi-language, all of that sort of stuff. Technology is the case. So and arguably you'd say that although that travel insurance company is quite small, big personal line carriers would be the same, because what you want to do is get the claim paid out as swiftly and easily as possible.
Yep.
And you want the workflow done entirely by the customer or through an API. So what I see in those sort of situations is real tech adoption, real driver. It's part of the passion of an organization. And I'll put in AI so that, as someone submits a claim, a photo is looked at and graded to see, okay, this is this kind of accident on a car, or, this is your this is your invoice for your teeth, and that's all paid. Happy day. So whereas commercial lines and specialty lines kind of sit the other way around. It's really a people-to-people business.
Yeah, business to business, isn't it? So it's a lot of it's done on relationships, and people buy from people and stuff like that. So
100%. So in that situation, things like workflow become quite important.
Yep.
But even then, I'm seeing a lot of AI coming into it, because some of these documents that come in are really complicated. I'll give you an example. So if you're doing the underwriting for property for Sydney Airport, you're going to get a spreadsheet that comes out of general ledger or whatever it might be, with an enormous amount of things in there: the fence, the runways, the buildings, and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got to figure out how much it's all worth. I've seen a lot of organizations think about how you use AI, and linking that with property databases, and overhead views of photos and all that sort of stuff to make the process a lot simpler. But in some cases, it is what it is, right? But I guess going back to your original question, is it adoption? I think I think it's a culture of an organization.
Okay.
So the culture is, in line where they want to bring technology in. It almost doesn't matter what kind of organization it is,
Yeah.
whether it's specialty or personal lines, they
Mm-hmm.
will try and push it
Yep.
because anything that can make that claims process swift and easy, happy days.
Yeah. Makes everyone's life
Um,
better. Yeah.
yeah. I guess though it's worth talking about money though, because when you think about it, as much as an insurance organization would love to spend more money and
Yep.
do all the things it would like to do, it does have a reputation that, you know, technically it's quite backwards compared to other industries.
Yep.
And we've spoken about the purpose of technology
Mhm.
for a company, but I think, and the culture, so if they want to push the envelope, they will. But more often than not, they'll be constrained by the fact that they're regulated. So there's a whole bunch of money that needs
Yep.
to go into stuff that they may not want to, or that they've got a lot of legacy technology, which is
Yep.
really expensive and scary to replace. And then there's the point of how much money can they put into
Yeah.
technology. And because, you know, just as a soundbite, kind of does a regular survey every year on how much money insurance organizations put into their technology. It varies between 2 to 3 to 5%, depending on what kind of insurance company,
Yep.
of their income. So it can actually be quite small,
Yeah.
given how complex their estates can be. So,
And
so
the
yeah,
return might not necessarily justify that spend because depending again which line of insurance or which industry sub industry, the margins aren't necessarily massive. So you're playing with small margins. Yes, it's probably higher volume, but is it worth that investment in technology? What's that return on investment? Does it push that needle? Does it move that needle, sorry, far
yeah,
enough forward to make it justifiable? A lot of the times it's not, and that's why they don't make that investment.
yeah.
Or
But
it's
they
just
do
too big
spend a
of a
lot.
project, so therefore it's a too big of an investment to get not much of a return.
It can be. And I bet you, in fact, I know that banks have got the same situation.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just a tricky, where do you put your money?
Yeah,
And it'll depend on that organization and what they want
yeah,
to put into it. But to be fair, it is exciting at the moment because with SaaS, you
yeah,
you now have the opportunity to get stuff at a better cost point, perhaps, or
yeah,
something more innovative. But yeah, just a bit of my views, and I'm sure other people have their views on
yeah,
insurance,
yeah.
but we
Absolutely.
talk about this a lot.
Okay, so topic of the episode is around building a high performance architecture team. You've done it time and time again, and I know that from speaking to people that have worked for you. What's your approach to building high performing architecture teams?
Yeah, so it goes back almost to what we touched on earlier
Yeah,
in our chat. It's about understanding where the bar is.
yeah, okay,
And not everyone knows where the bar is.
yeah,
But as soon as you put it there, it's great because we're
hmm,
all going to jump over that bar.
yeah,
And next year we're going to raise a little bit higher and get going that way. But I think a high performing team is one that's plugged into the business.
yeah,
So for me, it doesn't matter where my architect is, be they solution architect or enterprise architect or infrastructure architect.
hmm,
I want them in their businesses understanding where they're coming from and being part
yep,
of the delivery, part of the decision making. And that's going to come from them
yep,
demonstrably adding value to that organization. So, you know, the way that they add value is about having real clarity of purpose of
hmm,
what the architecture team does.
yep,
Um, so, I break it down for we are going to make decisions around what technology to use,
yeah,
but we'll help assure it. Doesn't mean that we make the decision on the technology, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So now you're entering into a partnership with another part of the business. They're giving you requirements, and you're looking at technologies, and you're, invariably, if it's an insurance piece of tech, everyone has a view on that as well from where they might have implemented it before. So that empathy with the business, I think, is really important. And each one of my architects, I say, make sure that you are close to your key stakeholders, have a regular meeting with them where you're just going to touch base on things that are important.
Yeah.
So my security architect, for example, goes without saying, fortnightly meeting with the CISO. Easy.
Yep.
My cloud architect, weekly meeting with obviously head of infrastructure, service management, and various other bits and pieces, just to make sure they've got that view. And then my domain architects, or EAs, same thing. Stay close, stay, so that as ideas pop up in people's minds, the architect's right there. But that clarity of purpose is really important, because that's how you measure the quality of your output, right?
Yeah.
So, you've got your blueprints that you're going to do. You've got your tech assurances that you're going to do as part of procurement, your tech strategies that you're going to work with a business. Those various, having a really clear set of artifacts where it's known what your deliverable is and how you interact with other people to deliver that promise, which would be, as simple as, let's reduce risk of implementation. Let's avoid the risk of cost. Let's get better quality, more accurate decision making. Those attributes that are the value of your architecture team, have them embedded in the culture of the team, so that they are aware of that at all times.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, because there is a stigma around architecture and the value that a good architect can bring to a business or technology function or whatever, and sometimes it's the stuff that you don't see that the architect's done that has brought the value. It's like a defensive midfielder in a football or in a soccer game, right? They don't get any glory, but they're absolutely imperative to the business function. Look at Man City at the moment, for example. So I always bring it to football for some reason. So, but what measurements are you looking at to decide whether that is success or failure or not reaching that bar? So if you could give us a couple of examples, because without putting a KPI on it, but relationships and embedding yourself in the business or the team or whatever, fantastic. How do you measure that relationship? Or do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So there's still more on how to build a performing architecture team, and that's working with the architects themselves and also their customers. But when you set up each architecture function, and then, I would say every year, every 2 years, definitely take a sounding to make sure you're still adding value to the business and course correct. I would be saying that, let's just say that the organization is new to architecture. So then the maturity is going to be low. Therefore, the KPIs that you're going to deploy are going to be really simple ones. Like, no procurements made without sign up at AAB.
Governance, right?
You might say no overturning of architecture decision. You may say something like every project has an approved solution. Really basic stuff, right? And you can measure that, right? But then if you go for a much more mature one, your KPIs are going to be different, right? There might be more about, compliance checks done with speed. You might even bring in ones of which is great, like cost savings to the business. So opportunities for rationalization, or, and then ones in the middle the obvious one that has to be in there is a net engagement score that's positive. So you want to make sure that your stakeholders are seeing that the service being provided to them is adding value to them. And if it's a new organization, it might just be that you have had engagement in some way or another on a monthly basis,
Yep.
with your stakeholders or your teams. Yeah.
And you mentioned doing like a course correct.
Yeah.
Yearly or whatever the time frame. That could be yearly, could be quarterly, could be biannually, whatever. How do you ensure that your architects and your team are still adding value? How do you
Yeah.
make sure that they are on that course correct if they have fallen behind?
I mean, twofold. One is that you will get feedback from stakeholders. So I would meet with most business leads fortnightly.
Yep.
Anyway, if not monthly, depending on the amount of activity that's going in each area.
Yep.
And they'll tell you.
Yeah, fine.
Because I'll ask them otherwise, like, how are we tracking? This is where we're going with this decision,
Yep.
I'm working with them anyway on all this stuff.
Yeah, you're getting that feedback loop.
Yeah. But what I would want to see also is an evolution of the deliverables. So if you
moving
are
the needle, moving that needle
exactly.
fine.
Yeah, so you'll see that I should not have to put as much involvement into these papers to get them to a standard. They're already coming to a standard.
Yeah, fine. Okay.
And then what I'd want to be saying is, and how can we make this better? Now let's start thinking about the next evolution. Okay, so what does this mean? What else should we be thinking about along the way? Because if you're setting up a team quite small, you're going to look at a small number of things.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you could starting a team from scratch, number of things you can look at will be quite small. You'll systemize and automate those to some degree in your thinking to a point where you go, okay, now where should we be thinking? And that should always be moving forward. If that's not happening, then your team's not innovating, they're not improving, they're not raising the bar.
Then they're not bringing value. Yeah, fine. What else would you add to that from a culture, building a culture within an architecture practice or team then, Pablo?
Yeah, so what you're touching on there is probably one of the most important points, right? So I get an architecture team that pulls together. And it's so important. I need them talking to each other, not competing with each other.
Yeah.
And that common purpose that we talked about earlier, or that value, they are then bought into that and signed on for. And I've had people join my team. They were not popular with the team, but then adopted that culture and became a key part of that team. And it's just wonderful to see that happening, because now you've got a single voice. And why is that important? Well, everyone's job's already hard enough.
Yeah.
But if you have a dysfunctional team that are taking pot shots at each other or undermining each other's work, well, it dissolves all the credibility of a team. So having a team that pulls together is really critical. But I don't think that's a dictatorial approach, right? Everyone needs to be heard. So there is a time where we go, all right, let's debate this. Is this the right thing to do? What have you seen? Let's go find some other viewpoints. If you're strongly opposed to this, I'm not going to let that lie and just overrule you. Let's go find out why that's the case. Because there's going to be a part of me going, all right, we need to factor that in. Or no, actually, it's true what you're saying, but for these reasons, which you may or may not be aware of, that's why we're going in this direction.
Yeah. Have you considered this when making your decision?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And now, what does that do? Well, it builds trust in each other, builds credibility in the team, because you've bounced things around properly, but you've got a cohesive team that pulls together. And that's
it's coaching rather than managing, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Well, yeah. But I think the other thing that you want to do is how we talked about that bar. Well, not all architects have had the same background or training. And in certain cases, they might not really had any training. They're just fallen into it and just doing the role, right? So I think that a really big part of having a high-performing team is that I get the bar set and I then train that person to hit that bar. Yeah. And if I've done that really well, that person will help other people hit that bar as well.
Yeah.
Now with consistency around the bar and everyone's managing it, and something that really helps for that is a position description that's really clear on what your responsibilities are, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So my ideal is I'll have one-to-ones on a weekly basis with my team, and we're not talking about existential questions. We're working on stuff together. Yeah. And what's happened really well is, the dynamic for me initially was me training people. It's now them coming to me and saying, hey, this is some new stuff. Let's have a talk about that. We're not talking about the training anymore to hit that bar. We're now having effective conversations around technology or business adoption, whatever it might be.
Okay. Yeah. And then what you're creating there, pardon the pun here, but is almost like cultural architects, which you find in high performing teams. If you think back to, again, talking football, but if you think back to the great team Man United had, where you had your Roy Keanes and your Gary Nevilles and stuff in the change room, bringing the expectations up, making sure the other players are hitting those expectations. They were basically doing Fergie's job for him. He didn't need to shout at people or anything like that to bring the bar up. The players and they're called, I think, Gary Neville, somebody in their book or whatever, called it cultural architects, and you need that in a high performing team. And as you say, if you train someone on a particular area, he or she then becomes that SME for that particular area. It's like, no, these are the standards and expectations. Let's go away and deliver this in this way, and so on. 4 or 5 in different areas, then all of a sudden that's how you get your high performing team. Sounds simple, never is. So very good. Right. I just could go ahead and stop that now, mate.
Yeah, nice, Mario. Mate, we've got
How do you see the role of IT architecture again evolving over the next sort of 5 years?
There was someone on your pod a couple of shows ago who talked about full stack architect, and that really resonated with me.
Yeah, Stephen Marso from Woodbridge.
Yeah. I thought he spoke very well on the topic. Architecture is really expensive. And if I think about insurance organizations in particular, even though they've got enormous amounts of money flowing through them, typically only 2 to 3% of their gross revenue is their IT budget.
Really?
So, yeah, and that's typical, right? I mean, because, let's say you make 100 million in premium. Well, that possibly up to 80% of that's going to go straight back out of paid claims.
Yeah. The margins are quite sort of tight, aren't they, in insurance? Yeah.
And then when you run your teams and your tech, run your teams and your operations and your tech, it's quite a skinny business.
Yeah.
So this idea of someone that can span multiple fields but be an expert in one, I think is going to become quite important. And the more that our architects leverage AI versus having to do the raw due diligence themselves, I think it's going to be an accelerator. I don't think they can get around doing the due diligence. I would still require them. I mean, great that you got yourself educated quickly, but now I still need you to go out and meet the suppliers and vendors and understand the tech a bit more deeply and the requirements a bit more deeply. But so I think there's a few accelerators along the way that are going to help to make architecture a bit more efficient, because I think realistically, to your point earlier, it's probably one of the most expensive functions in a team.
That
is quite intangible. So demonstrating value is key. And if everyone's always reducing budgets and all that sort of stuff, then I need the architects to be just that little bit better, a little bit sharper, a little bit more double trained, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you're right. In difficult times, I see it from a talent perspective. Architects are the first ones to go. That's where the fat is always trimmed, and that's mostly partly because architects don't know how to articulate the value that they're bringing, and also businesses expect engineers to do the architecture, and and then the tech debt racks up, and then so on and so forth, and they go and get the architects back in to help them come over it, and it is all quite cyclical. But a lot of it comes down to architects not being able to articulate and demonstrate the value that they're bringing, even though they do a lot of work in the background, in the shadows. It's just articulating that, bringing that to the forefront, and making sure the stakeholders outside of technology know that that's the architect's work.
Well, so I think you touch on a really good point. We've spoken about it today as well. Is about each architect being able to communicate effectively with clarity with their business stakeholders, because that's the most efficient way, a really effective way of creating value, right? But if I've got my architect sitting in the shadows, then they're probably not doing the right thing, right? My point, they should be working with the business, whoever that business would be for them. Have them known, because then their value is exercised. They're doing the right things as opposed to stuff that maybe doesn't have value. I don't know. I think the next 5 years are going to be interesting. So AI is immature now, right?
Yeah.
It's on its okay, that's not true. AI is very mature in certain areas.
Yeah.
But Gen AI is on its way in. And that's going to, I would hope, really, I know, and I'm certainly seeing it in my industry, is getting people to think about their jobs a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So now having an AI strategy is going to be clear, really important. What does that mean for an organization? Because everyone else is going to be onto it, doing something with it. And you want to have and retain competitive advantage. So how does this apply to your organization? Which means there's going to be innovation, which can only ever be a good thing. So I would hope, going back to that full stack architect, or full stack individuals, I think it's quite important, really, that they're plugged in, because they're going to become very important over the next 5 years as organizations figure out what they want to do with this. And
you've already mentioned AI, but what emerging technologies do you think will shape architecture's future the most?
I think that's a big thing. I mean, everyone's talked about data. Need to do something about that. Every organization should have a journey that's quite evolved on that. I'm certainly seeing it in my industry as being, it's a major asset for insurers, right? Cloud, if they're not already doing that, So quite a few of those horizons are now behind us, I think. I think every industry is slightly different. Insurance tends to buy packages before it builds stuff. But I'm seeing a headwind evolve where people are saying, you know what, I might go back to building. And so what that means for the maturity of an organization to be able to build software rather than buy software is quite a shift. So I can see that happening more, so people get the tech that they need. And that'll be another wave of stuff that.
Okay. I'm going to move on to our quick fire questions then. Now
sure.
We've spoken about what we believe is gonna how over the next 5 years technology is gonna evolve. What do you think in 2025, so within the next 12 months, is going to be a game changer from a tech perspective? And if it is AI, which everybody's saying, what particular part of AI?
You know what? I don't think there's going to be a real game changer in 1 year. But I do think it's quite a dull one, what I'm going to say next. But I reckon just the equivalent of Copilot going into organizations. And people start to see what they can do with that. I'd be hoping that people become a little bit more, get a bit more time back in their day. Just so they can focus on stuff. So meeting minutes, building out, rapidly building out summaries of, status reports and all that sort of stuff, and whatever else it might be. Not really a game changer, but it's a very good appliance that's on its way. I think over the next 12 months, people can get a bit more familiar with that, and then that will make a big difference.
Fair enough. Okay. Any advice you wish you received earlier on in your career that maybe a younger architect should start thinking about? Not saying that you're old, by the way, Pablo.
No, fine. So I think a really good piece of advice came to me mid to early career, which is look at it from look at it from their perspective first, because it, invariably we do work for other people, right?
Yep.
And building that relationship, building that connection so that you will find out what they're thinking and how that therefore influences your technology can only ever be a good thing.
Yeah.
So that was a great piece of advice that I got. And it was one that kind of very much made me change my whole approach to stuff.
Yeah.
So rather than pushing something through, it was more about, what's the right thing to do? What's the best way of getting it done? Okay, I hadn't seen that risk before. Good, let's plan around that.
Okay.
It was a game changer for me.
You got a good grounding though from your technology, from your consulting background, in terms of that experience where you're trying to keep the client or the customer happy all the time. So I imagine you bring that mentality to when you're sort of end client and your customer being internal stakeholders at various different levels across various different teams, treat them as a customer, build a relationship with them to the point where they can't or don't want to walk away from the business, so to speak, or you and what you're trying to deliver, get them on side and work together to get stuff delivered. It's a classic consulting formula, and not many architects have had that exposure, but I've certainly had people on the podcast that have said go and work in consultancy, even if it's just for 2 years. Regardless of the level, you'll learn so many softer skills that you don't get with an end client. What's the hardest interview question you've ever had?
Oh, hardest interview question I've ever had.
Or asked.
No, some of the most basic interview questions you must have an answer for.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're really hard to answer because, so why do you want to work for us?
Yeah. Oh God, here we go.
If you're not passionate and you don't care, make sure you've got that one answered before you even start.
Final quickfire question, Pablo. What question would you like to ask the next guest on the podcast?
Good question, Mario. I'd say, what is the thing that's excited you the most as a decision that you've made as an architect for an organization?
Well, look, sadly, Pablo, we've run out of time. Thanks so much for a genuinely great podcast episode. It's been really interesting and great chatting with you in detail around building high performance architecture teams. So thanks again for joining us, for giving us your time.
Thanks, Mario. I've enjoyed it. Cheers, mate.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Transformational Blueprints. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found plenty of insights and takeaways to fuel your journey. If you enjoyed the episode, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could share it, leave a review, or give us a like. It helps us reach more people in the industry who can benefit from these conversations. Don't forget to follow Synaxia Group on LinkedIn to stay updated on new episodes. The links are in the show notes. Join us next time for more tips, strategies, and stories from some of the brightest minds in technology and transformation. Until then, take care and keep transforming.